All right, everyone. Welcome in UGA football live with JC Shelton. We are doing post-game reactions. Tennessee Tech and Georgia battled it out in Sanford Stadium in a one-sided affair. The Bulldogs, we knew they were going to win handily here, right? But we wanted to see a lot of things in week two, right? As we build into this SEC slate, one of the toughest in the country, if not the toughest. We'll talk to Florida about that. But great day is a season opener in Athens, it looked like. I think the biggest takeaways that we're going to cover here really have to do with our pregame expectations. If you missed it, our Arthur Smith and I, we did a Twitter Spaces before the game and kind of outlined those things. We're kind of workshopping that. If we want to do that, or would you rather have us go live? Just let me know in the comments or in the DMs. They're open. But we're doing this today right here, and I was hoping Arthur would be able to make it here, but Artie's actually – he's going to Chili's. He had a date in Chili's, and I couldn't keep him from that. I couldn't keep him from Chili's. It's really a tradition for everyone to go to Chili's on a Saturday. But he did show me some things about the Georgia game that he wanted to look into for this show. So I'm going to do that for him. Basically, we talked about efficiency on third down, right? We talked about explosive plays, limit mistakes, red zone offense, defense. How does that play out? And we'll touch those right now. So efficiency on third down, a little lacking last week, 4 of 11, went 4 of 9 today. All right, so that's fine. You want to be right in there at 50%, right around that is possible. Anything over that is great, right? Explosive plays wise, 9 plays of 15-plus yards for Georgia. That's great. It was 5 rushing and also 4 passing, 4 for Tennessee Tech total. And that all came on the ground. Average completion for Georgia, 11.9 yards. 6.9 yards per rush for Georgia as well. Those are all really good things, right? Limit mistakes, 0 turnovers for Georgia. Okay, that's and we actually got one as well. We got a fumble. So I mean, look at that. Through 2 games, Georgia has yet to. So that's really big, especially like I said, we're using this game as a barometer, as a execution game. Get young players plays, right? Because we want to be ready for Kentucky next week. We'll get into Kentucky a little bit here in a minute. I got some things for you guys on them. Red zone offense, defense, really beautiful for Georgia. 5 of 5. They went 4 of 4 a week ago. Okay, 1-1 for Tennessee Tech with that, maybe the saddest field goal of all time. 3 points, right? 41st straight regular season win. Oklahoma, I think, has the record, and that was from like the 50s at 45. So Georgia's absolutely rolling right now. There's a lot of good things we can take away from this matchup. I think we'll start with Carson Beck here specifically. Really perfect start, right? Because Georgia gets a great return off a 3-and-out, right? Punt return from Anthony Evans. He takes off, shows his speed. And we talked about that entering the season as well, right? Because Georgia had a question to answer there after Ladd McConkey left. And we saw some of those flashes from Anthony Evans in the past. That really showed his ability and his speed. Georgia blocked it really well. And if he can do that, think about that in big-time games, when it comes down to maybe a defensive battle, right? Maybe a point where you have to flip the field, and that really helps out. You have Brett Thorson back there who only punted 1 time today. It was a 55-yarder. They got down at the 10. So that's just, he was sitting on the sidelines all day, only doing kickoffs, and then comes in and does that. He's an automatic weapon. So you pair that with a good returner, and if Anthony Evans can build on that, it's really, really big when it comes down to these tight games that Georgia's probably going to be in, especially later in the season. You get to the postseason, SEC champ, and such. So I think that's a weapon for Anthony, and he needs to evolve that. And if he can, that's another weapon for Georgia, right? Flip the field position, and a defense like Georgia has, it's big. So really, Anthony Evans sets up Georgia right there at the 22-yard line, I think it was, and then Carson Beck comes back 1 of 1 for a touchdown to start it. It's really good, right? Dylan Bell, I think he ran a tremendous route. Carson. He was a little off on the pass, but he threw it to where he could get it, and that's what counts, right? And then I think he went 10 of 10 the next 11. The first 11 passes went 10 of 10 after that one. He was efficient, right? He had all day to throw, which definitely helps. He's only sacked 1 time. But all day to throw, if you give Carson all day to throw, and those Georgia receivers get more time to get separation, it really showed how dangerous they could be. And don't get me wrong, I fully understand Tennessee Tech is Tennessee Tech here, right? First-year head coach. You're getting $500K to come play, which is a little light to me. Like, it should be in the millions. Help these boys out. But I totally understand that. So that's why we're focusing on more of what did Georgia do? Georgia's playing Georgia kind of to me in this reaction show here. Carson Beck actually moved 9th all time in Georgia passing, which think about that. That's 15 games, right? Padded the stats a little bit. I don't know if Georgia left him in there for a Heisman run or what. I thought he was going to come out at that point after his 5th touchdown pass, but 18 to 25, 242 yards, 72% completion percentage, which is right where he was last year. 219 rating. Very impressive. Gunnar Stockton also came in 10 of 12, 90 yards, more of a short perimeter game there, 83% completion percentage from him. Was hoping we'd get to see some Ryan Puglisi, maybe even some Jaden Rashada. That didn't happen. You could even consider that from a point where Gunnar Stockton doesn't have a lot of game reps, and he is that number 2 guy, right? That could be one of those, and I don't disagree with that at all for Mike Bobo and Kirby Smart. That is the play. I just wanted to see some Puglisi. I've heard great things about him in camp. I know he missed spring with that knee injury, but he was back. Looks like he's put on some weight this season as well. So I really look forward to eventually seeing him this year at some point in garbage time. Of course, it will be. Trevor Etienne. Let's move to the running game here, right? Trevor Etienne served the suspension last week against Clemson. It was unclear if he was going to play today. I mean, Kirby Smart wouldn't answer any questions. And the reason he gave was basically keep these guys out of the headlines and bringing that mistake up each time we give him an update, which I don't blame him for either. But we didn't know, right? We didn't know. He dressed out last week too. And then sure enough, he's on the field in the first series there. And Georgia really featured him, right? They didn't rotate much. They were really giving Etienne the ball, get his feet wet. We talked about that with Artie Lynch on the show this week. It was one of the things, if we were approaching it from, if I'm a Georgia fan, what do I want to see? And it's Trevor Etienne really get featured. Let's see if he can carry it multiple times in a row. If he can be on the field for 3 downs, be a third down back, be a first and second down rusher if he needs to, be in the right spot, pick up a pass protection. A lot of good things for him. And we kind of expected that, right? In the spring, you watched him in that game. And also at Tennessee Tech, so we figured there would be running lanes open. And sure enough, 5 for 78, long of 45. Does he have breakaway speed? I think I tweeted that out. We weren't sure. We hadn't seen enough of Trevor, at least in Georgia. He had that at Florida, and he does. 45 yards was his longest, 15.6 average. You can't ask for much better than that. He also caught 2 passes for 14 yards. That's what I'm looking forward to. He had 22 yards after the catch, right? And if you think from an offensive standpoint, and Mike Bobo has all these weapons, and we'll get into the kind of the efficiency as far as spreading the ball out and getting these guys some touches. When you think about it from that standpoint, I mean, the benefit that a running back adds as a catcher, and then yak off of that because he is already a running back. He has those skills after the catch. I mean, that's huge, right? I mean, think about your DeAndre Swift, your James Cook, your Kenny McIntosh. If you're a Georgia faithful there, which I know you guys are, I mean, how good was that offense and what wrinkles could it provide there? I think that's big, right? Watch that develop and see if we can get these running backs in the passing game some more. Then Nate Frazier came in, right? 6 for 28, 9-yard long, 4.7 average. Nate did go down, right, with the stinger. Well, I should say he walked off the sideline and was getting checked up on. He was in some pain. I think it's a stinger. It's unclear, right? But they didn't take him to the injury tent. They didn't go to the locker room. And this is a game, and the game was already decided way before that, right? So if it was anything serious, he would probably in the locker room, pads off, getting treatment, getting x-rays, what have you. Didn't happen from what we know. Still stay tuned to that, but it seems like a stinger to me. If you're watching enough football, it happens a lot. It's not serious. Branson Robinson, really happy for Branson Robinson. Did you guys see the way that his teammates reacted when Branson got his first touchdown since 2022? Or really, it was technically 23, but it was in the national championship against TCU when he went off, right? That was his first touchdown since then. Knee injury kept him all out all last year. Got some carries last week against Clemson. But watching him hit the end zone and watching how his teammates reacted really shows you a lot about the makeup of the team. Guys who went in and are kind of, biding their time on the sideline, waiting for the game to be over because they know it's decided, and other guys are getting snaps. And Branson hits the hole, looks really quick. I mean, that cut on that touchdown run was a really good barometer of where his knee's at. Excuse me. And I think that bodes well for Georgia, right? Now you're seeing the depth come to play, right? And when Roger Robinson gets in, I mean, there's going to be even more carries to really pass around. You can keep guys healthy and keep guys their legs fresh. That's the benefit of rotating. Georgia's done it for a long, long, long time. I know I'm not teaching you anything about that. But we're really going from a point to where headed into Clemson, we're missing Etienne, Roderick, questions about Branson, questions about Nate Frazier because he's so young. And now we might get to a point right when that SEC slate hits, and we got Bama in a couple weeks here, right? And I think that point is going to be awesome for Georgia as far as the running back position. You're going to have guys who already have fresh legs, 1, 2, experience, and carries already under their belt. That's big, right? Keep them fresh. Just like the rotate on the defensive line, same thing for running backs. Tyler Reese is in the chat. Let's put him up. Tennessee Tech's offense is equal to Clemson. I don't know about that. You know, I like Clemson to win the ACC championship. It might sound crazy with Miami playing the way they are. Syracuse looked really good, beat Georgia Tech, who already and I had to win that game. I think it was a 3-point spread. But Kyle McCord, who would have known? He leaves Ryan Day in Ohio State, all right, joins Fran Brand in Syracuse, and now he looks like one of the best bashers in the ACC. But no, I like Clemson to win the ACC championship. I know this is a little tangent, but I do. I think the defense is really, really good. Georgia is going to make a lot of people look bad like that time to time. But I think, you know, Phil Maffa, that running game, you know, you just really need Klubnik to step up a little bit. And I think he will eventually. That's just my take on it. But thanks for the chat there, Tyler. Move on to, let's see, where I want to go next. Arian Smith. That's a good place to go. Arian Smith. He flashed last week now. Led in receptions. He did for Georgia, right? Or yards, I should say. And then this week he comes and leads in receptions and yards. 4 for 73, a touchdown. Should have been 2 touchdowns. Beck, that was really, I mean, his only noticeable sale. I know he had another one in the red zone in the first half. Georgia trying to get a score, and he forced that ball rolling off to his right. I don't know if he's going to do that against anybody other than Tennessee Tech, to be honest with you. I think he was really, really comfortable right there because he wasn't getting much pressure, because he was rolling out and really had a lot of green grass to work with. That scared me a little bit, right? I'm sure they'll go back and look at that one, and he probably wouldn't throw that against anybody else but them. And then the one that he sailed when Arian was open as well. Could be a miscommunication with the route. We don't know that, of course, but it looked like Beck noticeably kind of took that on himself and missed that one. But Arian, yeah, this is absolutely incredible. I got a really cool stat for you guys on Arian. We'll get to that here. So this is from Patrick Gardner on Twitter. Shout out to him for a great stat research here. Arian Smith became only the second UGA player in history going back to 1892 to score points in 5 or more different seasons as a Bulldog. That's incredible. So Rantavius Wooten, for all you real ones out there, was the first to do so. He scored at least 1 touchdown in every season from 2009 to 2013, right? So I'm really happy for Arian. You know, we didn't talk about him much, did we? Right? Did we lower expectations for Arian a little bit too much this year? That's what I was thinking to myself watching his last 2 games, because that's a wrinkle using his speed. He looks to be in the right spots, right? He's beating guys on the back end. And, I mean, you establish the run game like Georgia has in that play action, man. That's all the different levels. You know, one by itself, not that hard to defend, even if you have really good athletes, but all the tools back in, right, for Georgia's offense and the weapons they have and the different looks they can give you, the balance. And that's really the key here is the balance. That's what makes it so hard. And I think the only team that looks like that, and I'll give you a rabbit trail here, that looks like that to me, at least right now, is the Texas Longhorns. And we know what they did against Michigan today. If you didn't see it, check the stats, check the highlights. I mean, Texas absolutely whooped Michigan. And it was not just that offense of Quinn Ewers. I give a lot of credit to that defense, even though Michigan has a lot of questions at quarterback. We knew that going into the game. That's why we picked Texas big. But really impressed with and that's a Steve Sarkisian offense, of course, guys. Like, we know that. Very, very balanced. And their running back issues, they lost 2 running backs this year, and they haven't missed a beat. So it kind of reminds you a little bit of a team in Athens as far as that. I'm not trying to say, you know, who's going to win that game here in October yet. But I'm just saying, as far as looks and just my eyes, my unprofessional eyes, that's what it looks like to me. But yeah, Arian Smith, I think that speed, along a 50 today, 6 targets. He had the most targets out of any Georgia Bulldog. I think they're really trying to use his speed. And I absolutely, if you're a Georgia fan, you should love that. Dylan Bell, 4 for 46 and a touchdown. 5 different receivers caught a touchdown today. 5 different receivers from Beck. I mean, you saw that last week, 9 different receivers caught a ball. Let's count up how many guys caught a ball today. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Now, that wasn't all Beck, right? Gunnar Stockton came in too and completed 10 passes. But yeah, that's an incredible number. That's what you want to have. Get these guys reps, get these guys comfortable, no matter if they're a senior or a true freshman, right? Love that touchdown to Lawson Lucky. Get his confidence going. Man, he's good with the ball in his hand. He is so good with the ball in his hand. Let's talk Delp's injury real quick. He caught 1 for 13. He went down with an ankle, right? Came in for the point after, and then came back off, right? So, the report was an ankle from the broadcast, at least, which if you watched on ESPN Plus, there's a lot of blackouts. I saw a lot of you guys upset about that. I would be too. You have every right to be. Feels like the TV situation has been so crazy with the direct situation. And now ESPN Plus, they're putting the number 1 team on ESPN Plus, which apparently they have to per an agreement with the schools. So that should be the only game this year that's going to be like that. But yeah, we won't know about Delp. That's tough with the ankle situation. Hopefully it's not one of those that requires surgery. Knock on wood. And then, we talked about Nate Frazier's and Nasir Johnson, true frost defensive lineman. We're not clear on when he actually went down in the last few minutes there. We're not sure what happened there. We'll move on to Robert Lewis Bailey. Thanks for the comment. We got UGA freshman D-line looked really good. I think early when Georgia first subbed them in, they weren't as much. That's when Tennessee Tech was really moving the ball well and running it well. There was some space there. I don't know what that's because. I mean, we'll have to go back and watch the tape. This is kind of the drawback to instant reactions. But I think as the game wore on and those guys got more comfortable, it did look better, especially in the last maybe quarter and a half. Tennessee Tech, they did get, 116 yards on the ground, which if you look at that stat, let's say you didn't watch the game, and you look at that stat and you say, well, Georgia, we love under 100 yards. That's what Kirby Smart's built on, right? 100 yards rushing, force them to be one-dimensional, and let your secondary eat. But they ran it 40 times for 2.9 yards per rush. That's what you want to look at, the 2.9 yards, right? And then passing, they absolutely had just no space. 5 of 8, 18 yards for Potts. Really tough day for them. I don't blame them. I was on a lot of crappy teams growing up, so much to the point where you snap the ball knowing you're going to get hit in probably less than 2 seconds. And that's all I could think about watching Potts kind of run for his life back there. I mean, he even had KJ Bolden coming down, getting his first sack of his career. And I think with that, it's a good time to move to the defense. And first, I'll go ahead and say this before we do. 498 yards of total offense for Georgia to 134. That's what you want, guys. I mean, you have high expectations going to a game like this, but that's what you want. 27 first downs to 9. Just think about all the highly rated teams. And I think at one point today, there were 4 top 25 teams losing to unranked teams. And some of those teams absolutely have no business being in those games, right? So you could have that, right? So you can go into a game expecting this, but you should really take into account every time Georgia or your favorite team, what have you, does a game like that as far as execution-wise and answering the questions that they need to before the SEC slate. Kentucky next week in Lexington. Defense-wise, and I've already mentioned KJ Bolden. Man, he's playing a lot. Or he's in the starting lineup. You got Dan Jackson. I don't know if Georgia just really liked Malachi Starks in that star position last week, right? Or they just thought it was the best lineup because of what Tennessee Tech was probably going to do, which is run the ball. And they wanted Malachi closer to the ball. KJ Bolden, a little lighter. He doesn't tackle like it, and we talked about that last week. I mean, he's a really good tackler for the smaller guys. Played a lot of football in his career, and Kirby Smart speaks very, very highly of him. And Kirby Smart also has said that he thinks that KJ might be a little bit further along than Malachi Starks was as a true frosh. And we know what he did, especially in the first game with the interception and such, but went on to have a freshman All-American season. They start KJ again today. Dan Jackson right there at strong, and then Malachi Starks at star. I'm really interested to see how they play Kentucky. Now, Kentucky, I think, is going to do something similar, and we can check in on Kentucky right now. I think you guys might enjoy that. I think they might do something similar against Kentucky because Brock Vandagriff is having a hard time passing. And I know, first year as a starter, new offense, new team. All right. Kentucky also has to figure out their own things as far as their offensive identity. But, South Carolina struggled with Old Dominion last week, right? And Kentucky right now, let's see what the score is, guys. I was looking at it earlier before I get my notes together. 17-6, South Carolina's up on Kentucky at home. Man, at Kroger Field, Kentucky has 6 points. Brock Vandagriff, 3 of 7 for 30 yards. If I was Kentucky, I wouldn't try to pass it against Georgia. Absolutely not. That's going to be tough, right? Because we know there's differences between South Carolina and Georgia defensively. That means I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if Malachi starts to play the star again. Is that what they're going to do against run-heavy teams? Because we saw it last week against Clemson, right? But I know we had an injury to Jonel Aguero there at the star position. So maybe when he gets back to where he's 100%, things change. That's probably a possibility there. Wouldn't be surprised, but really interesting. And if you love like the strategic moves, especially how Georgia plays defense, which there's a reason these guys come and play here. There's a reason that NFL teams love taking Georgia defenders. Right, they don't have a lot of miles on their body because of Georgia rotates guys so much, but also guys know how to play different positions. I mean, you think about Malachi playing 3 different positions. He's played corner before. Javon Bullard last year, I should say. I mean, he played different positions. He played nickel. He played strong and free. So I really love that from a football standpoint, watching Kirby Smart, Will Muschamp, Travaris Robinson, those guys work back there and put guys in good positions to succeed. But, man, keep an eye on that Kentucky-South Carolina game. I mean, Kentucky was a 10-point favorite in that game. But we'll get back to our regular scheduled program here. Go a little defense-wise. Defensive line-wise, really impressed. I know, Micah Williams didn't play. All right, they're holding him out for that ankle. He was actually in a walking boot. It could be a situation where – and we thought he was going to be out, right, because it was a grade 2 sprain. I've had one of those myself. The swelling is ridiculous for how much, you can get back from it in a couple of weeks, right? With Georgia's strength and conditioning and rehab process is probably a little faster than what I went through. But a grade 2, it's a heck of a painful one. It swells a lot. He was in a boot trying to protect it. Might see him next week, might not. Depends on, how Georgia is and Kirby Smart is with rushing guys back. They don't do it for good reason, right? It's about the season as a whole. That's why Georgia recruits the way they do. That's why they play so many guys early in the season to try to help. But I think in that spot, and, Tyron Ingram-Dawkins, who missed a lot of time the last couple of years with injury, right? I think he did a really good job in his spot. 3 tackles for a loss. He's a massive guy. I mean, he's like, how do you even describe him? He's kind of like Michael in that standpoint. Walker, a couple years ago, who went number 1 overall, kind of that guy, 6'5", 280-ish. All right, I don't think he can run kind of like Walker could, but 3 tackles for loss, 3 solo tackles, really good up front. Kristen Miller actually had 4 tackles. He had a tackle for loss. C.J. Allen, tackle for loss. All in all, 10 tackles for loss. You got 3 sacks, including K.J. Bolden, Ja'Cory Thomas. Yep. So that's 2 sacks from your secondary right there. That's good stuff, right? So Georgia was still throwing pressures their way, even though they know they had the game won, right? They know they could probably just line up in base and still wipe Tennessee Tech and whatever they want to do. Let's talk young guys real quick, right? We'll talk corner. And Jonel did play, by the way. All right, he did have that hammy earlier in the season. Last week against Clemson, and why he kept out. It was actually a game week decision, because he heard it that Saturday before, and then that's why they had to work Malachi in a different spot and KJ in the start lineup and such. But Daniel Harris right there, let's talk about that corner position opposite of Dalen Everett, which those guys have had a great start to the season. I know at least passing-wise, offensively, we haven't faced anything that's going to test us, and we won't face it next week, it looks like, against Kentucky. Bama especially is going to test you. You guys, I don't have to tell you, Jalen Milroe loves to throw it deep. Not telling you anything you don't know. They're going to get tested in that standpoint, because they love to run with the quarterback. You're going to be remiss if you don't load the box a lot, right? Instead of letting your defensive line. I really expect Georgia to play that offense completely different than they did last year. Wouldn't be surprised. But that cornerback spot opposite of Dalen Everett, right? It was Julian Humphrey last week. Now they did work in Daniel Harris today a lot. He is really, really physically gifted, maybe the most physically gifted guy in the back end for Georgia. 6'3". I mean, he's an NFL corner or nickel. I doubt they put him in the nickel. Corner, maybe safety. He could probably play either. I know Georgia cross trains him. Came in for Julian, played well. I think they're kind of battling for that spot, but I don't think Georgia's going to give one guy, right? They could start either or, right? And I think, speaking of, if they went and transferred to anywhere else really in the country, right, maybe other than Michigan with maybe the best cornerback in the country, Will Johnson, I think they go anywhere else and they're starting both sides. Really, really talented guys, and Georgia worked hard to keep them in. Y'all remember the offseason transfer portal mess it was? Hey, I'm thinking about going. Well, actually, y'all do a good job of getting guys to the league. I might stay. And you have some of the best defensive backs coach in the country. Good decision for those guys, I think. I think that's going to pay off for them. And then let's mention Dan Jackson as well. He recovered a fumble. He's always where you need to be. He's the elder statesman of that back end. I know we get hyped up because there's 2 5-stars back there, Malachi Starks and KJ Bolden, of course, excuse me. So I think it was a little overhyped, right? But Dan Jackson, I think he deserves a lot of talk around him and what he's done. Kirby Smart, he calls him, one of those guys who is in the position he is because of the hard work he's put in, right? He's been a long career for him, former walk-on, right? Rose up the depth chart, suffered some injury setbacks, but has stuck it out, and he's a Georgia watch play because he's so smart. That's my favorite guys to watch, and really, really smart defensive players. I think defensive line-wise, we didn't really learn too much because that offensive line from Tennessee Tech. We'll have to see it next week against a better Kentucky front, right? I'm really interested on teams that – well, Clemson too, and that was a good barometer, I think. But these teams that have really, really stout offensive lines, think about Alabama, Texas, Ole Miss, those guys. Tennessee has a good offensive line this year as well. Picked up a really, really talented guy from LSU and a former 5-star that's going to be starting right tackle for them. Those are going to be really the barometers for success for Georgia's defensive front and staying fresh, because I know last year and in years past it's come down to keeping guys fresh. And even if guys rotate in and out, keeping guys fresh against really good offensive lines. That's going to be a barometer in the second half of those games. So you really couldn't learn much, to my opinion. But I think from all things considered on that defense, it's great stuff, guys. Like I said, we're going to win handily in this game. But moving forward, we'll talk about that just for a second. Kentucky. We already talked about they're down 70-6 right now. So when Georgia goes to Lexington, it can be a little weird. And I looked up this the other day. Georgia in Lexington, average of 10.3 points. In Athens, 26.3. It's a weird spot. It is. It's a cool field. And Kentucky fans are great. I love Kentucky fans. I don't know why. Maybe it's because they're not used to winning too much, so when they do, it's awesome. But they're great people, unlike those fans in Knoxville. They're having a tough day today, though, right? And I think that's a big question for them is offensively, it looks like. So Georgia might have, we might have another team here that really, really, really struggles offensively, and that's not what you want to do against Georgia, because Georgia is going to have field position the entire game. They're probably going to get really, really they're probably going to get so much pressure that forces you into turnovers. So it's a bad look for them. But still, first true road game, right? We had a neutral site, we had a home game. First road game for some of these guys, and we talked about, and KJ Bolden and some of those guys up front on the defensive line as well. First game, they're probably going to get rotated in. Excited to see those guys, how they perform on the road. Kirby Smart does such a good job of motivating these guys on the road in tough environments. Not saying Kentucky's a tough environment, but I am saying it is going to be a night game. These guys, Kentucky fans, are going to have the time to have a few drinks, be loud and rowdy if they want to be. And, they're going to have the number one team in the nation come into town. And Brock Vandagriff, he's going to be motivated. You know that. I wouldn't be surprised if he played a lot better next week than he is today. Jamon Jumas Johnson there, the inside linebacker for Kentucky. He's starting for them as well. There's a lot of motivation here for Kentucky. A lot of motivation. And we talked about possible trap games earlier in the season. We didn't say this was going to be one of them. but I wouldn't be surprised if Kentucky plays very close in that first half. But again, if we're judging by last week, right, that's really what we can judge. Not so much today because it is Tennessee Tech, who we paid $500K to come play us. It is that Clemson game. It's a similar team as far as running the ball, tough up front. Mark Stoops' team usually plays really good defense. Not too much today. I know they only allowed 17 points through 3 quarters, but that offense for South Carolina looked so bad last week against Old Dominion. It's just I think it's one of those things, guys. We try to evaluate teams within the first few weeks. It is so tough, right? We got to see good teams play good teams to know really anything, right? And Georgia, I think, is one of those teams too that they look so much better at the end of the season. Championship teams do, right? There's not many championship teams who don't do that. They get better as the season goes. Kirby Smart traditionally is one of those coaches, and Georgia is one of those teams. So if I'm a Georgia fan, guys, if I'm you, and there's one guy that stood out, whether it be KJ, whether it be a linebacker Justin Williams, who I didn't mention, but he's flying around the field. He's so fast. 5-star linebacker we just signed in the 24 class. If you walked away with a name that you liked, that you saw, running back Chauncey Bowens, Dwight Phillips Jr., any of those guys, right? Lawson Lucky, any of those guys that you walked away and were like, hey, he's going to be a really good player, then that's a good day, right? You get a win, right? You didn't cover the underhit. We called that. Me and Artie both called that. We're 2-0 for this season. I don't know. I mean, we might be getting lucky. Blind squirrel finds a nut every now and then, but we are 2-0 in calling these games. It's a huge spread. But if you walk away with a guy in your mind that you really like, I think that's a good day. You get the win. Home opener in Athens is a beautiful day, and Georgia moves on to Kentucky, hopefully, knock on wood, without any huge injuries. I know we have a couple of scares to look into. Oscar Delp mainly. I think Nate Frazier had a stinger. If you're just joining us, Nate Frazier went off. I think it's a stinger by the way he was acting. Didn't go to the tent or anything. Didn't go to the locker room, and Georgia would have probably ushered him into the tent. And Nasir Johnson, a true frost defensive lineman. We're unclear on that one right now, and there might even be an update, but because I'm on the show, I'm not seeing it. Yeah, I think that's a great place to end it, y'all. Thanks so much for joining in and watching. Really appreciate your support. Feels like you guys love these live shows, and I'll definitely keep doing them. Blessed to be able to do this with my national coverage for Athlon Sports during the day. Got to be home covered nationally, so I thought I'd do this year, and I really enjoy it. So thanks for giving me your time and let me spew a bunch of facts and opinions at you. Hopefully we get to see a really good game next week for Georgia, get them prepped for a really tough SEC slate. Enjoy the football games tonight. Keep an eye out on that Tennessee game versus NC State, right? Nico, he's making some plays in his first 2 starts for the Volunteers. And you know how Tennessee fans love to be, especially if you're on Twitter. You love Tennessee Twitter. You don't love Tennessee Twitter. You hate it because it's just what's one word? Maybe just delusional. I think that's the best word, folks. And with another good game, if Nico throws for like 4 touchdowns and 300 yards tonight, that's all you're going to see for weeks, right? Until they actually have a big game. Georgia, of course, will play them later in the season. Watch that one. And I'm going to be watching, let's see, I want to make sure. Computer doesn't like me right now. Tennessee plays NC State. Oh, Colorado, Nebraska. Dylan Raiola, the poet. All right. Going to get the poet making a big start against Colorado. I do like Colorado in this game, guys. I do. It's going to be a shootout, in my opinion. And then who's going to win a shootout? It's going to be Shadur Sanders, Travis Hunter, Horn at receiver. Those guys are so good in shootouts. That's all they have to do because what position are they usually in? Shootout position. They're down or they're up with a defense giving up a touchdown or points at least every single drive. Shadur's running for his life back there. Yeah, I like Colorado maybe to win outright here. I think Nebraska's 7-point favorites. But we'll cut it off there, guys. I could ramble all day. Enjoy your college football. Enjoy your Saturday. Thanks for choosing to spend it with UGA Football Live. Catching us on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. Throw us a like, throw us a comment, subscribe, whatever you can do. We really appreciate it. And this will also be out on podcast form wherever you get your podcasts. All right, guys.